Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Thursday, December 10th, 2020 Planning and Community Development Committee meeting at the Sunshine Coast Regional District. I'd just like to take a moment to recognize that we are meeting from within the traditional territories of the Seashelt and Squamish Nations and thank them for their preservation of the land. December 10th is also recognized as Human Rights Day. And one of the ways that you can participate in that is to take note of a time, self-reflecting when your personal human rights may have been violated or trampled on in the past. So we do have a agenda ahead of us today. I don't know if we don't have any late items to amend the agenda, but I'm wondering if directors have anything they would like to add or change before we get started. Seeing no hands, can I have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? Moved, seconded, all those in favor? Great, thank you very much. First up today, we have Danny Tryon from the Gambier Island Community Association regarding the new Brighton Dock. And so we will have him brought into the meeting. Maybe. There we go. So Danny, you've got 10 minutes and go ahead and take it away when you're ready. Danny, you are either still muted or not actually with us at the moment.
Bottom left corner.
They appear to have left the meeting, so maybe they're just going to give it a restart. Oh, there we go.
Are we on now?
Good morning, Danny. We can see you and we can hear you.
Oh, perfect. Good. Sorry, nobody came on to direct me on how to do this. So I was listening to you guys. Anyways, thank you for allowing me to be here. And thank you, Mr. Chairman and directors. I am Dr. Danny Tryon, and I have a residence on Gambier Island, 700 The Grove Road. And I'm here today as president of the Gambier Island Community Association. And the reason I'm here is because of the unease that the community has over the potential loss of their of the new Brighton Dock and the associated barge ramp. So I'm just going to bring it. Can I share my screen here? Yes, I can. Okay, let me just see if I can do this. All right, good. Just adjust this here.
And we can see your screen.
Can you? Thank you. Okay, so in case you're not familiar with exactly where we're talking about, this is New Brighton. This is in the southwest peninsula of Gambier Island. There's where the ferry comes down, and of course, Gibson's down here. So, it's a great place to visit, and we welcome anyone to come over here. We're here today to ask two things. That the SCRD play a leadership role in working with the federal and provincial governments, the Squamish Nation, and our community to ensure the dock remains a vital public asset in the long term. Secondly, we are asking that this committee recommend to the SCRD board that it approve to direct the staff's examination of the delivery alternatives and development of strategies to make permanent the public access to the New Brighton Dock and barge ramp for the Gambier Island community. As you are aware, the SCRD strategic plan speaks of responsible infrastructure management. This includes maintaining, building, and replacing the investments for today and the future. It also speaks of advocacy and collaboration with constituents, the federal and provincial governments and partners, including the Squamish Nation, of whom we have a common interest, namely the new Brighton Dock. So Gambier Island needs your commitment to this strategic plan to ensure that the New Brighton Dock remains public for everybody for the long term. Now, a brief history of how we got here. The floats were built in around 1917, and they were visited by the Union steamship to bring people and goods to Gambier Island. And the picture on the left shows in 1930 what it looked like. And today it's quite different, of course. We've got a 110-meter pier here with a loading ramp and ramps here. And then over on the float are where the 22 boats can moor. They're both working boats and also pleasure craft, and also the BC ferry. So the New Brighton Dock is the only sheltered port on the peninsula, and it was federally designated as a remote access port by the federal government because of its location and also because of its all-weather nature. So, as I mentioned, the BC Ferries Central Route 13, Essential Passenger Ferry comes here as well. This is important because it makes upward of 35,000 people trips annually to bring people who live on Gambier Island and also our visitors. This link is vital because it has become an extension of the communities of Gibsons and Langdale, and where residents can live. That it affords an affordable option for people because so people can afford to live here. It's no longer just a recreational island, but it is actually a growing community of permanent residents. We rely on this year-round ferry service and boat moorage because there are no stores, there's no hospitals or schools on the island, and without public access to this dock, many people would have to leave their homes on Gambier Island. I'm sure you are aware that around 2001, 10 federal docks in the Howe Sound were offered for divestiture by the federal government. And the Sunshine Coast Regional District did take 9 of those docks. But the federal government kept the New Brighton Dock as a remote access dock, so the larger vessels could dock here. In 2013, the federal government revisited their divestiture process and decided to divest the New Brighton Dock. The SCRD was considering at that time to put it on the same funding footing as the other docks, but before anything could be done, the Squamish Nation, as is their entitlement according to the rights and title process, decided to acquire ownership of that dock. And they did that, and there was an agreement between the federal government and the Squamish Nation, which was funded for 5 years. And there now has been a 1-year extension, which is also funded, but that has now expired. So at issue 2 is the barge ramp, which is right adjacent to this pier. It was built in 1999 with funds from the provincial government. It had letters of support from the SCRD, and the federal government also did all the permits. So, and it is within the Crown leased land, and it's not actually part of the ownership or the divestiture of the dock, but a current application is being submitted by the Squamish Nation for transfer of the lease. This barge ramp is vital to the livelihood of people on the South Gambier Island. Several businesses on the Sunshine Coast rely on barges to bring their goods and services over here. It also, the only way we can get the private vehicles, commercial truck, hydro, maintenance, emergency vehicles are all brought onto the island via this ramp. So without this ramp, our life and future is in jeopardy. The ramp is considered a leasehold improvement to the Crown land lease. So it is possible that whoever owns this dock may dictate how it's used and who has access to it. I was recently contacted by Tom Butler on November 16th, and he's the director for the revenue services of the Squamish Nation. He confirms that the Squamish Nation Council wants to dispose of this dock and is aware that the Gambier Island community is exploring options to find ways to fund it and transfer ownership to a new owner. He states, and I'm going to quote, and this is kind of important because it is the first time we have had written acknowledgement of what the Squamish Nation intends to do. So in quotes, you may require talking to other levels of government to see ways to do this. Now that you have confirmation from the Squamish Nation Council's interest to dispose of the dock, could you kindly entertain those discussions with others? I'm certain you will require some time to discuss how this might be done with other parties. If you could provide me with a sense of timing of what that might look like, that would be helpful on our end. Please keep me apprised as to any updates that occur on your end, so I know that work is being done on this. We do have other offers on the table. The Gambier Island Community Association has initiated discussion with all levels of government to find some way to keep this dock open to the public. We realize there are probably many scenarios that would allow this dock to remain open to the public. And so we are asking the SCRD board to take a leadership role and direct staff and to, according to the plan, the SCRD strategic plan, to explore solutions to find ways to keep this dock, this vital infrastructure, open to the public for the long term. We really need this to happen for us. I thank you for allowing me to be a delegate to your proceedings, and we hope that we can move this issue forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for being here today, and thank you for sharing that information with us, as well as your request. Just while I wait to see if any of the directors have any questions for you, I will ask our staff. We do have a couple of motions with regards to New Brighton on record. I believe we're supposed to be getting something back here at some point from staff about possibilities with regards to the dock. If somebody can confirm that or correct me if I'm wrong.
Thank you, Chair. We have, I apologize, I can't recall the wording of the most recent motion, but staff are in discussion with the Squamish Nation, and our CAO recently corresponded with Mr. Butler, and perhaps can offer an update on that. And as well, staff have added a placeholder to the 2021 budget, understanding that there is work on this file occurring, and that there may be an interest in having something brought to the budget process early in the new year. Thank you.
Thank you, GM Hall. CAO McKinley, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I did have an opportunity to have a preliminary conversation with Tom Butler, probably around the same time, Danny, that you would have spoken with him last. We haven't had any further discussions, and we'll be having some further discussions with staff as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Directors, did you have any questions for our delegation? Director Ties.
Thank you. And yeah, just wondering, can you just say again how many people use that dock as as their main dock on Gambier Island?
Well, there was 35,000 passenger ferry trip or that delivered 35,000 people to and from the island in 1 year, as records that we got from the BC ferries.
Right. I'm just wondering how many residences are serviced by it.
I believe there's around 300 residences on the island.
Follow up, Director Ties, are you okay?
No, I guess I just have a, I guess I just have a comment. It's I think the board has been a little bit reluctant to tackle this head on because of our previous experience with other dock facilities and finding out how much they cost. But I do think that it is incumbent upon us to at least take a leadership position in that we do find a solution for you guys, and we'll have to see what it looks like. Personally, I'm reluctant to take it on as part of the SCRD, but that's I guess something that we need to discuss as more reports become available.
All right, Director McMahon.
Yes, I was going to say something similar. That, you know, if you said to me, "Gee, let's take on more docks," my first response would be, "No, please no." But I do understand that this is the primary access to Gambier Island. It's a really important dock, and so we're going to have to look at the whole situation. But I know that this one is needed.
Director Hiltz.
Thank you, Chair, and yeah, thank you, Danny. It's nice to see a nice, concise package, you know, of the presentation, and so I really appreciate that. So what is going to happen? Those slideshows, are you putting that up on the JICA website? The presentation that you have, or how else can the public see the slide presentation?
Well, we might be able to do that, Mark. I'm not certain how we can do it, but it is available, and we have posted it for the people on the dock committee. There's quite a large number of people on Gambier Island that have devoted time and effort to this, and so they are all apprised of what we've done, and they are part of this package and ongoing proceedings.
Okay, so that would be a question for staff: is can the JICA presentation somehow be rolled into the agenda package retrospectively so people can look at it through the SCRD website? It's a question. I don't necessarily want an answer, but it's a question about the public access to the information. And I just wanted to point out that JICA, the Gambier Island Community Association, was founded in 1944, I believe, has continued on Gambier Island since then, and has provided a huge service to the Gambier community over that time. I do have a question on your presentation. It has to do with the, and the other directors have kind of touched on it. The SCRD has docks on the Southwest Peninsula, and how, what do you think the relationship is between the new Brighton Dock and the other two docks, like Gambier Harbor and West Bay? Some people say Southwest Peninsula is kind of over docked. We're over infrastructured in that area relative to the services needed. So if you can say anything about that conversation that's going on at this point, or how the community sees those other assets that the SCRD currently owns.
Well, Mark, that's a great question, and I know we've been through this before. You know, that's sort of why we've come to the SCRD to get their expertise on this, because you know, you guys know the financials, you know the usage and all the rest of it, and so we need your expertise to find solutions. Okay, and I'm sure everything's on the table. We're not naive in that aspect. But you know, the other docks do play roles on the island for various reasons. Although, as you're well aware, the weather on the other docks affects what happens to them, and we just recently had, of course, 2 major faults happen because of the weather. So, but the new Brighton Dock is one that withstands all weathers. So that's why it is so vital, and it's where the BC ferries come in. So I have to leave it up to your committees and your staff to find a solution to that. Do I sound like a politician?
A follow-up?
Yeah, go ahead, Director Hiltz.
So I think for me, you know, what you're saying is the focus is really on the public access, how it's solved is not there. There's no clear answer at this point, and so the community is interested in exploring those options, which is that would be fair, that people are open-minded enough at this point that it isn't it must be this way.
I think you have to realize that it has to be, we have to be open-minded, because, you know, COVID has taught us one thing, that nothing is the way it was before. And so, you know, we have to hear your solutions and listen to them.
All right, thank you. Directors, do you have any other questions for our delegation? Otherwise, I think I heard Director Hiltz mention that he'd like to move receipt of the presentation materials from the delegation, but I'll just look to Director Hiltz to confirm that.
That would be a for sure. I would like to move that we accept the presentation from JICA. Yes.
All right, and I see that seconded. So all those in favor? Thank you.
The other part that I'm wondering about is closing the loop with the Squamish Nation, with Mr. Butler and JICA, and a timeline in terms of to feed into this system. I'm wondering if staff has an idea on it's sort of something like that, you know, explaining where we are at so far, in a formalized letter, that this isn't going to be put off for 20 years. There's action to try to good faith, I think, is what we're trying to say. So I'm not sure what that would look like, but I would think it would require some direction from board to staff to provide some kind of an overview of the processes, or where we are to date. Is that so? I'm fishing here, Chair, about is that something that staff needs to be directed to do, to kind of summarize that, or are they already engaged? And I'm just wondering where to put the board oomph behind here.
So a question for either GM Hall or CAO McKinley as to whether you need anything further from us at this time to either keep momentum or reinforce the intent of looking at this and the considerations.
Thank you for the question, Chair. I would describe the work that has been done by staff so far as information gathering to try to understand the situation and the positions of the various governments and agencies and community groups involved. And a motion directing staff to pursue a next step would certainly be helpful. I think we're at a stage where if it's the will of the committee to have staff conduct research on more focused research on what an SCRD role would look like here, that will require some staff time, and it may lead us towards work that would be needed to put together a business plan for a dock. Things like condition assessments, environmental reports. And so even just scoping that and bringing that back would be work that's outside of what staff have been directed to do so far. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director McMahon, I see your hand up.
Yes, I was going to raise the question of condition, but I liked that motion, and I would like to make it that staff do what he just said. Yes, the condition part is really important because we need to know here whether we're looking at a used Volvo or maybe a used Pinto.
As long as it doesn't explode when the next ship lands, we're okay. Okay. Does the recording secretary have something sufficient there, or do we need Director McMahon to restate her motion that GM Hall wrote?
Well, Chair, if I may, to assist the committee, I think having staff report back on work required might be the first step. I don't believe at this stage that SCRD is abundantly clear on what information already exists and might be shared with us. And through further correspondence with JICA and Squamish Nation and others, we may be able to collate some of that. So actually, Chair, your initial comment about that was something like that staff report back on the status of the new Brighton Dock and
next steps forward.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think that would be what staff would recommend if we can offer advice. Thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon? Sorry, didn't hear you, Director McMahon.
I'll move that.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for that? Okay, that's seconded. Director Hiltz, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I'm wondering about the work going into the budget placeholder. There is this vessel out there, this budget placeholder holding kind of a spot. So in order to fill in some of the gaps in that to be determined information, staff are kind of working towards that now. So is that kind of the best place to report back is at round one budget? Is that you're working towards that? Is that kind so the direction might be to report back in a more thorough method of with more information at the round one? Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Let me tack onto that real quick with a question. The placeholder that's in the budget, is that for research and development associated with acquiring the dock, or is that a placeholder to handle the operations of the dock?
Thank you for the question, Chair. When staff wrote that, we didn't have any specific scope in mind. Just knew this was a live file and didn't want to have something emerge out of the blue. I take Director Hiltz's point about timing, and whether it's specified in the motion or not, staff have that timeline of the budget process in mind, and would endeavor to converge any next steps with that process in order to assist the board in decision making. Thanks.
While it's obvious that it should be part of the budget discussion, I don't know that we want to necessarily unduly bind our staff to trying to get us an answer in time for that budget process. Director McMahon?
Sorry, I realized that I'm not quite on the motion at hand. I was just suggesting that the community association might do some research on other docks with similar situations to see if there are operating agreements or other, things in place that we could emulate that have been successful. Just a thought.
Okay. Any other? Oh, Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I was, well, my area is not directly involved or funding this. We do have several facilities in my area that are run by harbor associations, and I am aware of what happens when it's time to divest a dock. And there's a hierarchy of who gets first, second, third choice at it. I think we might want to make sure we tell the provincial government or the federal government, whoever's holding the lease right now, that the SCRD is interested in looking at this, because I believe with the existing documentation, if it's still in a normal divestiture mode, which I'm not sure of, the local government would get the next crack at it if the First Nations no longer wanted it. But I think if you don't tell them that you're interested, it could end up going to a private individual, which is I'm not sure that's what the association is looking for. So,
thank you, Director Lee. Do we know offhand if the federal or provincial governments know that we're looking at this and are wanting to be involved in this?
If I may speak, we have communicated with both the federal and provincial governments. The federal minister, Mark Garneau, has said they're not interested at all in and getting involved with the repurchase of this dock. They don't want any of that dock stuff happening anymore. So we have a letter from him on that. We have tried to communicate with the provincial government. They are aware of the situation. They do hold the leasehold. So, and they are now, that leasehold is in their hands because the request from the Squamish Nation. So that, and they're aware of it, but because of the election, everything got postponed. So we haven't been in communication with the actual transport minister at this time.
Thank you, Danny. That was actually an operational question for staff. If the provincial or federal governments are aware that the SCRD has an interest in this at this time, but I don't know if GM Hall knows the answer to that.
Couldn't have answered it better than Mr. Tryon or Dr. Tryon, and the letters from our MP and Minister Garneau were on a previous agenda, Chair. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Director Seegers, I had seen your hand go up.
I was going to do a point of order that we have a motion on the floor we should probably deal with, and then we could get into some of those other comments and questions.
Sure. Okay. Any other comments on the motion on the floor? I'm not seeing. Oh, Director Hiltz.
Just if I could hear it from as the current state of it.
Sure. Can we hear the motion read back?
Thank you, Chair. I have that staff report back on the status of the new Brighton Dock and next steps forward.
Okay. And I'm assuming that voting on this is going to be the ports function, which is B, D, E, and F, since you guys will be stuck with the bill for it. So I'm going to call the question then, seeing no more hands. All those in favor? All right, that's carried. Thank you very much. Anything else that anybody would like to bring up with regards to the new Brighton Dock, or shall we part ways with Danny and carry on with our agenda? All right, I'm not seeing any further hands up. So thank you for coming today, Danny, and thank you for presenting.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Next up, we have Pam Robertson. It's actually a typo in our agenda package. It's Robertson from the Tiny Home Alliance of Canada, who's going to be our second delegation here. I did just want to bring up a possible perception of conflict that I may have. I'm looking at a tiny home project in another part of the province, and I have consulted with Pam on this in the past. And so while I don't vote on any of the rural planning issues here, I just wanted to bring that up. So there we go. So thank you for joining us, Pam. We see you. We hear you.
Great. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I think I heard before I went away and came back again, Alton introducing me. Pam Robertson, for those who don't know me, I have a couple of hats. One is president of the Tiny Home Alliance Canada, which is a national board which works with the nation interprovincially, all things tiny. I'm also full transparency. I own a tiny home building company here on the Sunshine Coast named Sunshine Tiny Homes. So I will pull up my information. Oh, and I also wanted to mention that I'm a long-term resident of over 45 years here on the Sunshine Coast as well. So this is definitely my home. I just wanted to bring forward, first off, an item on the agenda from September 2018. I believe it's in your package. And please forgive me for a plethora of different forms. I probably won't get the award of being as organized as the previous delegator, but I'll do my best to kind of stay on track, and knowing I only have 10 minutes, that's correct. Okay, I'll try my best to get all this information compiled in that time. So there was a delegation that was presented by myself to the board on February of 2018. So if I could just bring up the page, and forgive me for this as well, share screen. I'll just go through a few keynotes. It was Judy Sao was the author at this time, and it was in regards to a pilot project that was presented in the form of allowing temporary movable small homes or structures in the form of a multitude of things. So my understanding, there was a report written. It was presented to the electoral areas, and I believe all but one had voted in a yes for that particular pilot project with the request for more information. And my understanding also is that it made first read. And so it kind of fell off the agenda and hasn't been brought back forward. So I figured that right now is an opportunistic time, mainly because it's kind of following suit with the Urban Matters report for affordable housing here on the Sunshine Coast. And I myself and a large number of members of the community as well have always thought that tiny homes on wheels, or right now at present, a lot of RVs or movable structures could have the potential to offset some of our crucial housing stock or lack thereof at this particular moment in time. So I think I just kind of, I guess what I would like to do is just represent it and bring it back to front of mind and have it put back on the agenda. I don't know if I need to review a lot of the key points on here, but basically what I'd presented was the ability to have tiny homes slight in where I think there's 90% underutilized properties on the Sunshine Coast that have the potential for a secondary housing through the temporary use permit process. So Yuli was working on implementing how that could be done, and it was a 3-year pilot project with the notion that with monitoring and assessing throughout those 3 years, if it was effective, that the exit strategy just be that if it's not broke, don't fix it, and develop a plan to embrace and incorporate these on a more permanent basis. Can everybody hear me still?
Yep.
Okay. Just going to bring this.
Okay. Is that the?
That's part one. Yeah, sorry, that's part one of my delegation this morning. So it is mainly, wondering if we could bring that forward again. I do have a second part that I'd like to present as well with new information over the last 2.5 years since the delegation was first given about, what's happening nationally or interprovincially, or, our neighboring countries in the US, what they're doing to legalize tiny homes on a more permanent basis.
Carry on. Go ahead and keep going.
Okay.
We'll have discussion after you finish.
Okay. 1 second. So the one thing I wanted to bring up actually was in regards to the reasoning behind permanently legalizing the tiny homes is just recently I believe it's the district of Seegers just implemented their bylaws for short-term rentals on the Sunshine Coast. Is that correct? No? Is there somebody on the Sunshine Coast that has put in?
Regional district did.
Gibson's is looking at some stuff.
Yeah,
The regional
district's the only one that.
Regional district, I think, is the only one that's actually passed anything, though.
Okay, so there wasn't anything mandated that you needed to live on the property if you have a short-term rental?
That's the SCRD's bylaw.
That's okay. So here I'm speaking to the SCRD then. I've had 3 people call me directly as a tiny home builder, explaining their circumstances, that because the short-term rental bylaw was implemented where they were living as a long-term occupied renter, they've been asked to leave and they're looking for an alternate solution to their living situation. The owners are now, removing people living in long-term rentals because they need to be on the property in order to facilitate the rest of their short-term rental property arrangements. So I think this would be a great solution to being able to offset some of the housing stock shortage that we have here on the coast, and tiny homes being one viable option to be actually the Airbnb and leave the rental stock permanently occupied alone. So if you could open, I just actually put quite a few documents together, one of them being examples of the permanent legalization of tiny homes in our bordering North American neighbors, which in the US, they have 15 states, and within those states, there's 26 counties or districts that have legalized tiny homes on wheels directly. So I've given an example of the California's legalization. I'm not going to go into too great a detail, but one of the things that they have decided to do is to adopt the IRC, the International Residential Code, Appendix Q, which has been out for a number of years. I believe 2015 is when they started Appendix Q, that is related directly towards tiny homes on wheels, or tiny homes in its form, to provide some important aspects about tiny home dwelling, such as what was outlined. And forgive me, I didn't put this actually in the agenda, but can you see that, everybody? This is a quarter-page ad that was placed by the Regional District Building Department, discussing some of the matters of their concerns about tiny houses in the community. They were discussing some key considerations about building a tiny home, and what is and what is not qualified as a tiny home. One of them singling out in one of their considerations, specifically tiny homes on wheels. And one of the concerns that they had was that they wanted to make sure tiny homes were constructed if they were on a trailer or chassis with wheels without permits or certification presents many challenges for owners wanting to use them as a residence. So in most cases, the trailer mounted home cannot meet requirements of provincial building code, local bylaws with regards to fire safety, septic service, ventilation, etc. So we, through the National Board of Directors for Tiny Home Alliance Canada, we're creating what we're going to try to have as a sort of a outline for a permitting process for permanent occupied tiny homes. And one of the things that can happen is the adoption of the Appendix Q, which is in direct relation to stairs, like instead of those crazy steep stairs that you see on some of the tiny home shows, fire like egress and lofted or ceiling heights and some of those regulations. And so we wanted to put that forward as a possibility for said building departments or the permitting process to encompass some of the building codes that are actually out there that are easy to adopt. So one of the examples is if you go to the example of the California, they've adopted the Appendix Q building code, and what my understanding is that municipalities can adopt specific codes and standards and write them into bylaw, and then those would become part of the permitting process. So I just wanted to put that forward, sort of more on a more local level, and this is mostly verbal, but the City of Victoria, they're exploring what is needed to allow for movable tiny homes as an alternative to garden suites. And so Mayor Lisa Helps has asked the city to put into their draft of their 2019 to 2022 strategic plan to adopt tiny homes on wheels specifically into their bylaws as a permanently occupied viable housing crisis solution. Other relevant communities throughout BC, so zoning bylaw, or sorry, in Ontario, Grey Highlands is looking at rezoning to incorporate tiny homes on wheels. Here in BC, Bluegrass Meadows is a thriving tiny home community since about 2016 in Terrace, BC. Grand Forks, BC has implemented the bylaw, and I have that up it's outlined as bylaw 2039. zoning in the Grand Forks and its relation to tiny homes on wheels. They have put in their bylaw, forgive me, on page, just gonna move you guys over here, 23.
Just a couple more minutes left, Pam.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, we're just going to bypass that. But those are there for your records to review how the Grand Forks has implemented somewhat a temporary use permit as well with an exit strategy in their bylaws. So many other communities are being approached by advocates specifically through Tiny Home Alliance Canada and also Tiny Home Alliance of Vancouver Island. We work sort of together collaboratively with other advocates throughout Canada. Vancouver Council, there also is a document in here that outlines their motion to adopt tiny homes in the Vancouver area, City of Vancouver, to construct shelters and dwelling units, whether built by factory or on site. So they are going to do this through regulating it through the National Building Code, the Canadian Standards Association, CSA, which is what we build our tiny homes through at Sunshine Tiny Homes, a BC Building Code, and then Vancouver bylaw, building bylaws. So they're looking at how they can incorporate tiny homes as a viable housing solution for, I think, mainly the homelessness population at this point. But I'm encouraged that they're looking at it in itself entirely. So the City of Edmonton has also already passed and approved tiny homes on wheels. There's an explanation page that I've posted in the package as well on how they're on their website of how to go about putting a tiny home on one's property. So there's more extensive information, but we at Tiny Home Alliance Canada are presently working with the infrastructure of the permitting process and the building code requirements, which we would like the opportunity to do the same with the building department here on the Sunshine Coast. So they've approved, the planning department approved tiny homes on wheels at the City of Edmonton, but there's a little bit of a conflict with the building department at present. They have what's called a standetta. We're working with some professionals to be able to change or implement code through the standetta in Alberta through their BC Building Code and technical safety authorities. We can do this by permitting. How we can do this, we suggest, is having a permitting process with a checklist that tiny home builders and DIYers, because there are a lot of DIYers here on the Sunshine Coast already, by implementing the Appendix Q. The Technical Safety Authority, whom I work directly with, Ron, who is our BC rep, to ensure that other tiny home builders that are building for production are minimally meeting the Technical Safety Authority inspections. So for their electrical, mechanical, gas, and plumbing codes, and if necessary, engineered drawings to be submitted to the department with a permit prior to building. So we at Tiny Home Alliance Canada have all the tools to make this happen, and together we can make a big difference towards combating the housing crisis here on the Sunshine Coast and beyond, that will be reaching right now a decade before we know it, when the housing crisis began. So our motto is "the time is now," and we just ask that the board be open to working either directly with us at Tiny Home Alliance Canada, or at least starting the process of permanently accepting and legalizing tiny homes on wheels specifically as a viable housing solution. The one last thing I want to leave you with is that tiny homes right now, as an industry standard, we've adopted the CSA Z240 and 241, mainly because we want to build things that are inspected and approved and tested and regulated, and that we have a third party who does our inspections, so that we are producing a viable, safe, somewhat regulated product for people to live in. Now, we would prefer, as building, because we build basically on a chassis, but everything from the chassis up is built to BC Building Code, International Residential Code with the Appendix Q, National Building Code, and the CSA, which supersedes building codes, BC and national, by the way, specifically for their electrical, their gas implementation, and their plumbing. So we feel that as the builders ourselves, that we are extra. We actually go over and above what is required through BC Building Code or National Building Code for our tiny homes, and are willing to make the changes necessary to implement a new system, which is what we're working on through Tiny Home Alliance Canada ourselves. So thank you very much for your time. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Pam. Unfortunately, we did not receive the materials. Are you able to resend those out to us, please?
Oh.
Yeah, we did not receive.
Okay. And there is also an extensive, it's called the condensed PowerPoint. So it's basically what we've adopted from the Tiny Home Industry Association in the United States. They're kind of our partner allies, if you would. We share information. Well, they share more with us than anything, with their powerhouse ability to be change makers down there. So there's a PowerPoint that kind of goes over, talks about how tiny houses are different from said RVs or motorhomes and such. Thank you.
Thank you. Directors, do you have any questions? I see a hand already. Director Ties.
Thank you, Pam, and thank you, Chair. I have a whole slew of questions, and I guess a lot of them would probably be answered by either looking at the 2018 report, which I don't know if any of the directors reviewed them before this meeting, or some of the documentation that you've sent. So I'm wondering, rather than pepper you with questions like, are you thinking of having this as a replacement of an accessory dwelling unit? So on properties where an accessory dwelling unit is allowed and it has not been built yet, or is this in addition to or an accessory dwelling unit? So where there's already one built and you want to put another one in, or even on properties where accessory dwelling units aren't even permitted. So these are sort of the kind of questions that I have, as well as around septic requirements and all that kind of stuff. So, I'm wondering.
If I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
So in the original delegation, I had Chris from the Vancouver Vancouver Coastal Health Authorities. They gave a support letter alongside, discussing the potential for the septic to be approved alongside the pilot project permitting process. So the idea is, yes, minimally to be an alternative or recognized as an auxiliary dwelling unit for properties who are already allowed to have a secondary dwelling up to the 592 square feet at present, unless that's changed, I'm not aware. So having that be an alternative to that. So, and then also looking at properties that are not zoned for a secondary auxiliary dwelling unit, or implementing it as laneway house or granny suite, that kind of thing as well. I don't know about additionally having more than one. I don't know, that would be something for the planning department to review. I personally want to develop a tiny home community here on the Sunshine Coast. So having a comprehensive development sort of situation be looked at, but that's something for the future.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I know, Pam, you've been working in this field for a long time, and there have been a lot of changes over the last number of years, as concerns and considerations have come up in the community and among different governments that you've been adapting to address. So I think there are lots of questions that all of us have. What I'd want to look to, so, and we didn't get your package, right? So we need to get your package, but I'd like to ask staff, given we have a whole bunch of questions and we want, all of us to be involved in what the answers are and staff to see what we're actually asking and getting the responses. How do you see this communication happening so that everybody's kind of in the loop about the information flow?
Just real quick, GM Hall has identified that the package was received and was supposed to have been distributed. So if you haven't received it this morning, that appears to have been a glitch. So staff have the package. It just didn't get to us yet. So,
and staff's apologies. It was. I'm looking at the outgoing email. We will have to circle back to make sure that it gets received at your end.
Okay, and so then my question about how we manage the communication on this so that everybody's kept in the loop. I mean, and I understand at this point it is a regional district, rural planning issue, but given it will probably be something that we'll be dealing with in the municipalities as well, all the information will be relevant, and we'd really appreciate to be kept in the loop on all of that. So that'd be staff. How do you want us to manage this?
GM Hall.
Thank you for the question, Chair. I guess thinking back, staff have endeavored to provide information through a lunch and learn a while back, a few months ago, about the various forms of smaller or alternative housing, and included in that information was one of the prime points was that the BC Building Code doesn't set a minimum building size, and so if bringing that information back to directors would be helpful. I believe that many of the questions raised in the delegates' presentation this morning are addressed in those in the information that was provided there. Or if there's a desire for something more, then we can follow whatever directive the committee might wish to make. Thank you.
Okay, so follow up, perhaps then the information from that lunch and learn could be recirculated with the information that Pam's brought forward, and we can review the questions that we have and see if they've been covered off in there. If not, we can take it further from that point. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's right. I do vaguely remember a lunch and learn on the topic, but that was a whole other era ago. So
BC, before COVID.
That's right, before COVID. Director Beamish.
Chair, I'd just like to suggest that, like the regional housing strategy that we've just completed a reporting on, this is one of the regional housing solutions. And we should look at it not just in terms of rural planning, but I'd like to suggest maybe we look at, in the near term, planning a workshop around this, because I think our planning staff and building department would also be interested. We may as well learn it all at the same time instead of learning it incrementally. And to me, it's a bigger issue than a committee issue. It's more of we need 2 or 3 hours on this just to discuss it out and talk it through, because I'm sure the Gibsons will be interested in finding a solution to the housing. What I don't want to create is more short-term rental opportunities and not solve the housing problem. So that like several years ago, we had the issue of basement suites. We brought in line and we gave people basement suites that have suddenly become short-term rentals type situations. When we still have the housing problem. But if we could, if I could suggest that maybe we could look for an opportunity for a workshop on this question, because I think it's an important question for the coast. That would certainly be helpful to everybody to learn at the same time.
Thank you, Director Beamish. Pam, I saw your hand go up. Did you want to just add into that at all? Or?
Yeah, so 2 key points. One was in the temporary or the pilot project, it actually had that it was to not be used for a short-term rental purpose. And there was also a cap on how much could be charged for the land space rental rate as well. I think it was $450, which may or may not be an incentive for property owners to go forward with that amount. I believe that right now the rates that are getting charged for either RV or tiny home rental space, forgive me and my dog, hey, enough, is anywhere in excess between, I've heard $525 to $850 a month in excess thereof, which kind of starts, being unaffordable. The other is I would like, if I could be part of the workshop or present information on maybe a little bit more of a streamlined, cleaner package than what I presented to you guys. I will admit that I was in a bit of a hurry to get some of this information, and I had a project come before me, which I hadn't anticipated between the time I accepted the delegation and the time I was to give it. So I would like the opportunity to present something a little bit more, lean and compact. The other is I would like to open an invitation. We should be finished in the new year, a tiny house that I would like for staff and for directors and board members of the likes, and even the planning or the building department to cordially invite for an open house. We can do it through COVID regulations, but to bring everybody kind of through a tiny home so people can get a better idea and understanding of what they really are.
Thank you, Pam. And certainly I can encourage people, if you haven't set foot in a tiny home, to check them out just for your own education. Director Pratt.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Pam. It's your passion for the tiny home movement is really inspiring, and I know we've been in contact quite a bit. I have done the tour of your facility, and am really intrigued by the concept overall. I do remember we did have a pre-COVID or a BC lunch and learn around tiny homes, and I actually remember Mr. Patey's excitement actually around it, because it's a really intriguing way to help bring housing in, and there's some interesting challenges with the building code, because of course with when you start lumping in RVs and motorhomes into the tiny home movement, yet motorhomes and RVs are built to a vehicle standard. They're not built to building code. Whereas with the tiny home, even though they are still on a chassis, are very much, they're more regulated, more around, I would say probably like a mobile home almost, kind of, or a trailer type thing. So I guess my question would be to staff is, where are we at with the status of our pilot project around tiny homes that was started in 2018?
Who would like to take that question? Mr. Patey.
Sure. Thank you for the question, Chair. The pilot project still does remain on our work plan, and it hasn't really proceeded past the report that was provided by staff due to a few different reasons. We had experienced some change to our planning resources. There were emergent demands such as a housing needs assessment and support for implementation of the foundation agreement, and a dramatic increase, particularly in 2020, in public inquiries and applications, resulting in a pretty significant backlog. It does remain on our work plan. Maybe this is reiterating that the staff report did indicate that while there are some restrictions on minimum width for single family dwellings in some zones, really there's no minimum size restriction for dwelling units, and that's also within the building code. So it certainly is possible to create a tiny home on a permanent foundation type of community. But with the draft rewrite of the zoning bylaw, we're certainly considering how we might further reduce barriers to affordable housing, include provisions to implement some of the recommendations coming out of the housing needs assessment, and staff resources approved for 2021 hopefully will enable some of this work in this important area. It's exciting.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I realize that there is a lot on staff's plate right now, but the bylaw 310 revision seems to have been pretty much bogged down for a considerable period of time. And we do have a housing crisis on the coast. So I'm wondering if it would be feasible to look at a couple of straightforward amendments to bylaw 310 to fast track them, and rather than try to do the whole bylaw. And one of the ones I'm thinking about is allowing carriage house suites on properties in my area. Right now, I believe the minimum property size for a carriage house suite is half an acre. But there's a lot of people who are interested in doing that. I've had a lot of inquiries. And that would be a pretty simple way. Also, the last report I saw on the bylaw 310 public information meeting was that there was a lot of support from the community for that kind of additional dwelling on our properties. So is there an opportunity there? Can we do something that will take action to help create more housing options in our existing neighborhoods?
Without specific, because it's a tiny home discussion we're having, without specifically waylaying it for carriage houses, is there the ability to be nimble with just a few targeted changes that can then be wrapped up or revisited as part of an entire revision? GM Hall?
Thank you, Chair. I will attempt to offer a response here. I'll say that we're well advanced with the work on the zoning bylaw renewal, and with thanks to everyone in the community and especially our APCs and advisory committees who gave us a lot of helpful input early, as the director noted. I think that while it's possible to talk about quick and easy amendments to a zoning bylaw, when we get into the public information meetings, consultation, public hearing process, even though they might be narrow in scope, the process has a long tail, and as it should when we're talking about changes that affect a lot of properties on the coast. And so given where we're at on the work of renewing the bylaw, staff's preference would be to continue on with that work in order to bring forward a package that addresses a number of housing needs all at once. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Ties.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's any what sort of the next steps are regarding this, and just want to get some clarity whether we're still going to do some sort of a lunch and learn, or whether we need a motion to get a report back or anything like that.
I will just point out that we have had a lunch and learn in the past on it. We do have materials that we can have staff recirculate. We do have the delegation materials from Pam. I understand now that they're in our inbox. I just don't have my email open right now. So I'd suggest that we review those, both sets of materials, and then decide going forward if there's anything further we need to educate ourselves on before we ask staff for anything specific. I'd hate to tie them up writing a report that all the answers are sitting in our inbox right now. So Director McMahon?
Yeah, I was just wondering, what is the status of the bylaw 310 review? When is it likely to show up on an agenda next year?
That's a loaded question, but I don't know if GM Hall or Mr. Patey want to try and guess at a timeline. It's okay if the answer is no.
Chair, I will say that staff are putting every spare moment into that, and we are working. We have a number of process improvements that we've implemented in the last 6 to 8 weeks to respond to the intense development cycle that we're in. Directors will read in the Coast Reporter about our new property report that will significantly reduce the time we spend at the counter or by phone or email these days, addressing inquiries that are relatively that can be self-served, and we are looking at some other internal things as well in order to be able to be more proactive and put the work we need or that we know is needed into the strategic priorities identified in the strategic plan. And so with that said, we are looking to the first half of 2021, and we remain committed to the zoning bylaw renewal as our priority proactive planning project. Thanks.
CEO McKinley, I see you've unmuted yourself.
Yeah, Ian nailed it. The only thing I would add is that there are going to be some additional process improvements and other improvements identified and coming to the board at a report in the not too distant future that we'll be looking for some support to implement that will further free up some planning capacity to do this high priority, high value work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any additional hands up at this time, but I will ask for a motion to receive the presentation materials. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Okay, thank you very much. I think we're not, I think we've got some reading to do and some revisiting of our previously presented materials to do. And we'll see where we go from there. Not seeing any other hands up. So thank you for being with us today, Pam. Thank you for presenting. And enjoy the rest of your day.
Yep, thank you for having me. And you enjoy the rest of your day as well. And happy holidays.
Thank you. You as well.
Okay, take care.
Directors, can I have a motion to receive all reports and correspondence and minutes? Thank you. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. Do we want to take a 5-minute break, or are we okay to keep going for now? 5-minute break? Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break, or 7-minute break. It's 10:43. We'll be back for 10:50. And welcome back. Next up on our agenda is Annex B, pages 4 to 5, and that's Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program regarding the Seashells Aquatic Center building envelope review. So turn that over to staff.
Thank you, Chair. This report relates to a new stream for the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. After reviewing candidate projects, staff identified that building envelope work at Seashells Aquatic Center was the best fit and most likely to achieve support. And the board previously supported an application to ICIP for this project for a different stream. Staff made an application in November based on the very short intake window. But if the board would like us to proceed, then a resolution of board support is required to finalize the application. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Directors, any questions, comments, recommendations to move? Director Ties?
I'm happy to move the recommendations as presented.
All right. Is there a seconder for that? I see a seconder. Director Hiltz, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, just a question about the recommendation. And Clarif, are we in two streams right now, or just so we're applying for two separate granting streams? Is that the intent?
You mean, is this one separate from the previous Investing in Canada Infrastructure Grant Program application that we've submitted?
And yes, staff can confirm that it is separate and that the grant program guidelines permit that, to have multiple live applications in different streams for the same project. Thank you.
Thank you. Follow-up, Director Hiltz?
Yeah, it was the second question. It was cost overruns. Or just there's no limit on the cost overrun. And does staff have any idea what the scope and scale of potential cost overruns might be?
GM Hall.
Thank you for the question, Chair. So the phrase about cost overruns that's included in the recommendations is standard sort of liability release for the grantor, and the risk of cost overruns is mitigated through the tendering and contract management process. And so with a well-managed contract, there should not be any cost overruns. That said, there's always the possibility of unforeseen circumstances, but in that case, there's a process to manage those overruns that on a project of this scale would likely involve a discussion with the board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Director McMahon.
Yes, I just thought I'd briefly get on my soapbox to point out that having to redo the building envelope of a building that's only 13 years old is kind of unfortunate. And in a later report, I note that our rec center roof apparently only has an 18-year lifespan. So when we're doing these projects, we really need to be building them well and building them to last. And that's one of my concerns about the Cooper's Green project, is that it's a building designed for the 20th century. And that's what our rec centers are too. But we need to be looking forward when we're looking at investing taxpayer money in new buildings. That's just my comment, but I'm happy to apply for government money.
Thank you, Director McMahon. I see no further hands up, so I'm going to call the question. This is voting all except for Area A. So, sorry, Len. All those in favor? All right, that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex C, Ports Capital Upgrades and Ports Engineering Consulting Services Contract Update. And it's got GM Hall's name on it, so I assume he's speaking to it.
Thank you, Chair. This report seeks authority to continue with an engineering service agreement for SCRD's ports facilities, and board approval is needed per the delegation bylaw, as the value is expected to exceed $100,000 sometime early in 2021. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. This is voting B, D, E, and F. So I'm looking to directors for questions, comments, recommendations. Director McMahon.
I will move the recommendations on page 6.
All right. Is there a seconder? All right. I have seconders for that. Thank you very much. Any questions, directors? No? Gonna call the question. B, D, E, and F. All those in favor? Thank you. That's carried. Moving on to Annex D, Snow Removal Associate Member Insurance. And turn this over to staff, whoever would like to speak to this. I see Valerie has joined us. Good morning, Valerie.
Good morning. Sorry, I'm just working between two screens here. So good morning. As mentioned in the report, the SCRD has been working towards finding a contractor to provide services for smelting and snow removal. When the contract was awarded, when the contractor was awarded the contract, they went to obtain their insurance certificate from their insurance provider, and the broker advised them that they would not be able to cover snow removal as that is under their current underwriting appetite. Basically, they advised if the contractor takes on the contract, they will cancel their CGL policy, which is their commercial liability policy, unless the contractor is able to place snow with a different market like MIA-BC. MIA requires a board resolution to add an associate member to the SCRD's policy because of the potential financial consequences, which may affect our premiums in the event of claims, and our $10,000 deductible would be applicable if there were any claims. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Looking to directors for any questions, comments, recommendations. Director Seegers.
Sorry, clicked the wrong button. So should something happen, we put them on as a, an insured service underneath our policy. Should something happen and there is some kind of claim, how is that going to be managed? What is their responsibility or liability inside of that?
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So we would ultimately, our insurance, MIA insurance would cover any of the liabilities. So if somebody slipped and fell on ice that wasn't removed properly, it would go under our insurance claim. And so we would pay the deductible. It won't go on the contractor's insurance.
Right. So I'm thinking we're then taking on the risk of the deductible as well by doing this. I'm not saying I'm against this, but how do they play it? Has this conversation been, had with them? Is that line clear about what we're responsible for, what they're responsible for? If it's negligence on their part, are they responsible then for the deductible? That kind of thing. Have we had those conversations to sort that out? I do know we need to have them covered. We need this work done.
Yes, we've had those conversations. If it's accepted when we draft the contract, it will be negotiated in the contract that we'll be providing the insurance, except for gross negligence. So, not saying that this would happen, but if the vendor was impaired, insurance doesn't cover accidents from people being impaired. So he'd be responsible for any gross negligent events. So we've had those conversations. The expectations will be outlined in the contract in what we call Schedule D, which is the insurance aspects of the contract, and very clearly laid out the roles and responsibilities.
Okay, so follow up then on the recommendation with regards to what you said. It talks about the service providers agreement. So what you're indicating is there will be a subsequent agreement to take care of the insurance? And does that then need to be in the recommendation?
So there'll be two agreements. One is what's called a general service agreement, which outlines, the responsibility of the snow removal, whether, they go out at 2 inches or if it's on call, all that scope of work stuff will be in the general service agreement. The service agreement is an agreement that MIA requires, which will outline, and that's what we need the approval for, and that will outline that we're adding them to the MIA membership associate program, and for the term of how long we are. So the term will line up with the term of the contract.
And the conditions.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
We certainly live in interesting times for insurance coverage. Seeing as how the alternative would be for me to get out to Frank West Hall with my snow shovel, I'm willing to move the recommendation on page 8.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Seconded. Okay. Director Hiltz.
Thanks. It's about this changing nature of the industry, and so this is how the industry is changing. All local governments would be facing a similar kind of problem. I'm thinking that is it an industry-wide issue in BC, this slip and fall liability in snow clearing? Is that what's going on out there?
Yes, I'm not, an insurance expert by all means, but it has come up in a lot of risk forums. So I belong to a risk forum with a bunch of risk managers from all over across the province. One of the Lower Mainland ones went to 4 different underwriters to get their own. They do in-house insurance or in-house snow removal, and they couldn't get their response from 4 different, and they're big companies, they're big underwriters, all responded and said that we will not take the snow on. We will not take the snow on. That's why MIA, this is a new program under MIA to have snow removal. And that's why they've addressed it and came up with allowing the snow removal contracts to be under the member association. Because it is, I don't know if it's happening in Alberta or anything, but it is definitely in BC. And it's a little bit harder, I think, in the Lower Mainland because our snow is so inconsistent as well that it's harder to get the contractor to come out and invest that equipment because we don't know if it's going to snow this year or not, or we may get a day of snow. Whereas up north, it's, snowing for months.
Thank you. Director Beamish.
Could I just ask for clarification under discussion of the second paragraph, second sentence? It says basically they have determined due to this material change and risk that they will not continue to insure the contractor if the contractor takes on the contract or is able to place snow removal with another market. Does this mean they lose their current commercial liability for other things, or how, could you explain that sentence, please?
Yes, I think it was programmed. It should say unable. Sorry about that. But so basically, the contractor has said that if we cannot place the snow portion of his business in a different insurance market, they will cancel his entire policy.
Okay. Okay. And secondly, does this company have experience with snow removal?
They have less than 3 years experience with snow removal.
Yeah.
So they're relatively new.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director Beamish. I see no further hands up. Would somebody like to move some recommendations for me?
Recommendations are on the floor.
There is a motion on the floor.
Thank you. Not totally with it. Then I'll call the question. This is Planning and Community Development Services voting all. So I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, then that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex E, Development Variance Permit Application DVP 00063, 5642 Minty Road.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just offer a short word before our senior planner presents the report. I wanted to note that directors will have received a number of pieces of correspondence in the last few weeks regarding this development variance permit application. And some of this correspondence indicates a concern with how public feedback based on notifications to property owners within 100 meters has been received. And staff wish to advise the committee and those who provided the comments that all of the comments that have been received have been considered and they have been provided to directors. And the Local Government Act does not prescribe requirements for how comments based on DVP notifications are handled. And SCRD's policies and bylaws are not prescriptive on this specific question, but it's generally addressed through our correspondence policy. And SCRD's past practice has varied. A review of the past 6 meetings shows that 10 development variance permit applications have come forward. And of those, 5 involved comments received from neighbors. And of those 5, 3 reports had the comments represented through summaries, and 2 had comments attached. And again, that would be in keeping with our correspondence policy. As stated at the last committee meeting, including public comments in agenda packages has privacy implications with regards to ensuring legislative requirements for the disclosure of personal information are met. As part of continuous improvement, staff will prepare a procedure that clarifies this. And we regret any confusion caused by this process, but did want to ensure everyone that legislative requirements have been met and that all of the comments received have been provided to directors. Thank you.
Apparently I muted myself. Thank you, GM Hall, and turn it over to Mr. Sayal.
Thank you, Chair. Since the November 12 Planning and Community Development Committee meeting, additional public comments have been received, and in total, 54 members of the public indicated support for the proposal, whereas 15 oppose it. Throughout the application process, staff have continually conveyed public feedback to the applicant, and in response, the design of the latest design of the development has undergone numerous revisions, and most of the critical concerns raised by residents have been addressed by detailed analysis of the previous staff report. The key points include the proposed heritage conservation of the historic general store and revitalization of this community hub are widely supported by the community. And all existing and proposed uses of the buildings on the property are permitted in the current C2 zone. The overall scale of the buildings and deck remains much the same as the existing. The overall parking demand based on the proposed uses decreases by 1 space from existing parking demand. Delivery frequency will be reduced by combining deliveries to the grocery store and cafe, and by increased internal stocking space. Garbage storage will be indoors to avoid conflict with on-street parking and traffic. Privacy is improved by relocating the single-family dwelling unit from the south building to the north building, providing a buffer to the residential property to the north, and by screening and planting around outdoor sitting and activity areas. Overall, it is a challenge to maintain and develop a commercial property like the Half Moon Bay General Store among a residential neighborhood in a rural community that has evolved around a historic transportation and commercial hub. And there are inherent land use conflicts, which are results of the historic settlement of the area, and not solely due to the commercial operation of the general store. So although the proposed redevelopment plan may not solve all the inherent issues, it represents a reasonable solution and considerable effort to achieve the goal of heritage conservation while trying to maintain a scale compatible with existing buildings and uses provide vital service to the community, improve operation efficiency, and lessen impacts. So therefore, staff recommend issuing the development variance permit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Director Pratt.
Thank you, Chair. I have a number of comments and a couple of questions, as well as some other things going on. So if anyone else wants to speak while I'm speaking, feel free to interrupt me if I go on too long. First off, I'd just like to comment on GM Hall's comments at the beginning. I appreciate the reflection on process and look forward to a clearer procedure and going forward. And I know that was one of the comments that has come out through a number of the correspondence items that we've received on this application, and I appreciate that. And I do want to reassure that any of the correspondence that we have received has been read and considered by directors. There is one question I had specifically. There was a question regarding the property line on the southwest section of the applicant, and regarding the survey. And I just want to check with staff to see if that has been resolved to this point.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So the applicant has indicated to staff that they were able to unearth some property markers, and which can help to resolve the differences in different surveys. And it is possible that an agreement can be reached with the adjacent property owners regarding the property line.
Okay. Thank you. If I may continue, Chair.
I don't see any other hands, so go ahead.
Okay. One of the, and Mr. Seo referenced this in his comments as well. This is a property, and this is an area that traditionally began as a commercial and industrial hub and has gradually evolved over the years to become a primarily residential area. And I do, I understand the concern, especially as our world has gotten busier, and we've gone from more of a primarily water-based transportation to a rubber on the road type transportation, that there is some concerns around the safety of Minty Road in general. And I do have a proposed motion that I'll bring up after we've dealt with the recommendations from staff. But I made sure that I've spent a lot of time in the area, and I only live about 5 minutes away from here. But last night I wanted to make sure that, I took another look through fresh eyes, and I do understand that, it is a small area. It is primarily residential. There are some road width challenges in that area. There are some parking challenges in that area, but I believe that we can go forward, and I do support the recommendations that have been put forward by staff. I've heard the concerns from the residents within this area, and I will note that even at the government dock, there is a fire hydrant that sits right in front of the government wharf. So it does necessitate if there is an emergency within that area, we still need to ensure that we can get a fire truck down that lane. And it's, I will say that our official community plan does designate the store and a couple of other spots within the area, not the residential spots, but within the other public areas. This is designated as a hub within the OCP. And that's important, and it is an important gathering place. And as I said hi to residents as I was walking last night, it's, and even at dusk, there are still people out walking around in December in the dark. And it's a very popular area, I know this. And With everything I've said, I'd first like to move the recommendations that we have on page 11 of the report. And then, as I said, I do have an additional motion that I would like to make.
All right. I see multiple seconders for that. Thank you very much. This is rural planning, voting A, B, D, E, and F. I'll ask if directors have any other questions or comments regarding the recommendations on the floor. No, your dog doesn't count, Director Pratt. Seeing no hands and seeing no directors looking to speak, I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. That's carried. Director Pratt.
Thank you. So my other motion is regarding our the traffic that is on Minty Road, and I've heard very clearly from the residents the concerns around the speed of traffic, the advocacy that they've done in the past for traffic calming that has fallen on deaf ears. And one of the things I have committed to residents is to look at methods to investigate or implement traffic calming with Modi. So in order to formalize that, I would like to make a motion that the Area B director work with Modi and the Minty Road community to investigate and implement traffic calming on Minty Road.
And I see a seconder for that. Okay. Directors, any questions, comments? Director McMahon.
This is a good idea. Solutions. Will you come and visit Ocean Beach Esplanade in Area E? Because we've got traffic problems there too.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I know Ocean Beach Esplanade very, very well, Director McMahon. It's got some of my favorite beaches in the on the whole Sunshine Coast, and I know it very well because my kid's Nana lives there. So yeah, I understand the issues there as well.
Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, a question for the director. Director Pratt, so the scope is limited to traffic calming only, like parking is off the table? You're restricting your scope, or are you looking at more of a advocacy of the traffic in general? I'm just wondering if you're what your scope is limited to.
If I may, Chair. So I was specifically around traffic calming because technically the speed on Minty Road is 50 kilometers per hour, which is a little alarming when you think about the width of the road, especially as you get towards the wharf. But from turning off of the highway, and that's one of the things I heard really clearly is that residents are concerned about not just the parking, but the traffic speed. I'm not opposed to looking at additional parking methods. All of Minty Road, or even opening it up a little bit further than what I suggested as a motion, making it a little bit more broad. I will say we had a flood in this area. Well, sorry, we had, it's another one of those, as Director McMahon would say, the stormwater. We had our own Niagara Falls on Minty Road about a year and a half ago. And it's the bridge that goes across the stream there, I noticed last night, is still, it is deteriorating. It has taken out a corner of one of the properties that borders the bridge, or pardon me, borders the stream. So there's some additional issues there. So I'd be happy to broaden the motion. I was thinking primarily speed, traffic calming at this point, just for a safety concern. But there's some additional issues with Minty Road that safety concerns. So I'd be happy to actually entertain an amendment to say to implement for traffic calming and safety concerns on Minty Road. So I'd be happy to entertain that as an amendment.
All right, and I see a seconder for that. Any comments on the amendment? No? Okay, then I'll call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? All right, that's carried. Thank you. So we do have an amended motion now, or an amended recommendation on the floor. Seeing no further hands up, I will call the question on that as well. All those in favor? Okay, that's carried. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Director Pratt.
Just to close this out before we move on in the agenda, once again, I'd like to thank the residents, the applicant, and staff for the work around this project, for the communication on it. And I know that I do know that there are some continued concerns around this project, and I do hope that the neighbors will continue to talk to each other, including the applicants who are neighbors within this community as well. It's part of our good neighbor guidelines that we talk to one another, and it's part of how we work here on the Sunshine Coast and how we try to model working together. And to be frank and to be candid, I've been surprised at the being told that it's considered insulting to talk to your neighbors, and I've been really disappointed by that. I believe in hearing all of the issues and keeping an open mind until we're here at the table and we're talking about it. And I would hope as neighborhoods that we can continue to talk to one another and have open, candid conversations as we move forward and try to understand what is going on for everyone as they move forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Director Hiltz.
Yes, thanks, Chair. A little bit of indulgence to thank Mr. Zhao for his explanation that one application doesn't solve all of the past historical deficiencies of how we have settled land. And, this is, can we fix all the problems in one application? And so I appreciate that perspective, because I sometimes that's what I want, is everything fixed at once, and how we keep moving through it. So I appreciate the balance that you brought to the project. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Moving on to Annex F, Egmont Pender Harbor Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 708.2/2020 and Electoral Area A Zoning Amendment Bylaw 337.122/2020, BC Ferries Earls Cove, consideration of third reading and adoption. And turn it back over to Yuli.
Thank you, Chair. So through the public hearing process for this application, no comments from the public were received. The proposed amendment bylaws to recognize existing uses and accommodate future growth of the BC Ferries Earls Cove Terminal are appropriate for the location and can provide a community benefit for the Sunshine Coast. Staff recommend that the bylaws proceed to third reading and adoption subject to approval of the Ministry of Transportation. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to recommend that we accept the recommendations as presented by staff on page 42.
All right, thank you very much. And I see a seconder for that. This too is rural planning, A, B, D, E, and F. And ask directors if they have any further comments. Director Lee, I see your hand still up. I don't know if you wanted to speak.
Director Pratt for chairing the meeting. She did an excellent job and I appreciate it. So thank you, Director Pratt.
All right, Director Hiltz.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in the recommendation, my interest is in the approval from MOTI on the section 52, and there has been some discussion from another local government that MOTI might not be right up to date on its approvals. So do staff anticipate any kind of a delay in this kind of moving forward? Like, has MOTI's approval been received, and is there an expectation of this delaying the condition being met?
Go ahead.
Thank you for the questions. The approval from the ministry, it is a standard procedure, and staff do not expect any delay. The ministry has been involved throughout the application process, and they are supportive of the development proposal.
All right, thank you very much. I see no further hands up, so I will call the question. Areas A, B, D, E, and F. All those in favor? All right, that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex G, Development Variance Permit Application DVP 00068 for 1269 Burns Road.
Thank you, Chair. I'll speak to this one. In this variance, the applicants are seeking variances to relax the parcel line setback requirements to permit a recently reconstructed parking deck. The new structure is a little bit wider by around 50 centimeters and a little bit higher off the ground than the previous one by around 20 centimeters. And this does replace the previous structure, which was a legally non-conforming structure. As to siting, the proposed setbacks are consistent with the previous existing structure. MOTI has issued a public highway permit to allow for the encroachment onto their highway setback requirement. And no objections have been received from any of the surrounding neighbors. Staff don't anticipate any impacts to neighbors, and the variance does not result in inappropriate development, particularly given the very minor changes compared to the pre-existing parking deck. So staff recommend issuance of this development variance permit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Not being a structural engineer, I found it rather interesting to review this particular project as it's being used as a parking structure and is built out of wood. So I thought it was great. Director Hiltz.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm supportive of the application and the recommendations. It's for me, this is another one of these iterations of old needing to be replaced in a place of challenging parking and small. This is Hopkins Landing. This is an old established area. And this is this revitalization that I just keep seeing over and over again. I will have a comment later on in the APC minutes, but at this point, I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Okay. Do I have a seconder? I do have a seconder. Thank you very much. Any further comments, questions, amendments from directors? I see no hands shooting up. This is rural planning again, A, B, D, E, and F. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex H, provincial referral, Shashi Shaklam proposed names, areas A and D. And turn this over to GM Hall, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. This is a report back from direction provided in late July relating to renaming proposals made in alignment with the Sechelt Nation Province of BC Foundation Agreement. As noted in the report, community-to-community dialogue has occurred. A small grant for a future community-to-community forum has been approved by UBCM, and staff have assessed the practical implications for SCRD services. Based on the work done to date and in keeping with the province's December 31st deadline for comment, a series of recommendations are provided for the committee's consideration. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I see I've got a speakers list forming already, and we'll start it off with Director Beamish.
Mute. Yeah, I'd like to suggest a change to the recommendation 2A, and that is we eliminate the words small so that locations in this shall swear as an important part of building relationships. I don't think we should try to limit that to the importance of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Beamish. Director Ties.
Thank you, Chair. And I would also like to propose an amendment to Part A of the recommendation. And I'm wondering if we can add the Squamish territories to that as well. I think if the Squamish Nation were to approach us with the same proposal, that I think we would probably be just as happy to entertain that as well. So I don't know if it's a little bit preemptive, but I'm wondering if we can add it.
I will let GM Hall add to this, but I believe that this is a specific request to respond to a specific request for the Seashell Nation items. You know, just looking at the header for 2, it's very specifically talking about this being a response to the Geographical Names Office for the Seashell Nation requests. But I don't know if GM Hall wants to add anything further to that.
Thank you, Chair. You are correct. We are responding to a specific referral. Staff would observe that coloring outside the lines, as it might be considered, is certainly not a problem for the province to receive. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Director Ties, follow up?
I guess I'm willing to let it stand as is, but yeah, I just wanted to express that I think that the board is also happy to entertain any such notions provided to us by the Squamish Nation as well.
Thank you. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. This report burned up my mental, emotional, and spiritual tank. I'm referring. I'm not sure about 2C. I'm looking at the question that was asked in the referral is, why would it not be appropriate? And I don't see how 1C necessarily addresses the appropriateness. It's and following kind of in the lane that there's been a lot of public debate in Area A about this. The regional district as an organization has not really received that. My role as an elected was to listen to the Sechelt Nations presentations, which so clearly to me demonstrated the significance of this area to the nation. So I'm trying to figure out a reason why it's not, the government is asking for it. Why is this not appropriate? SCRD's interests are not affected administratively, operationally. There are concerns about costs for postal services and branding. I don't really see that in the SCRD's lane. I think that the public can weigh in with the provincial government. This decision rests with the provincial government. This is a referral. So, and I in that 2C, I'm going, it seems like the SCRD is speaking for the province and the Sechelt Nation there. And I'm not sure if we should be speaking for the province and the Sechelt Nation. I think we should maybe be speaking for ourselves as a corporate entity. So I'm just going to, that's where I am with this at this point. I'm going to say I'm disappointed that we cannot wholeheartedly support this. So I'm struggling with the recommendations as it is. I'm just going to leave it there and listen.
Okay, thank you. Director Seegers, I see your hand up.
I think the key words in that recommendation for me, to Director Hiltz's point, are at this time. I think it's not saying never, it's saying at this time, and that further dialogue happen with the Sechelt Nation and with the community to look at how this would move forward. So we're saying at this time, let's take a pause, do some more work, and then come back and revisit this with both the community, the Sechelt Nation, and the greater SCRD. So I agree with you. I understand where you're coming from on that, but those to me are the three key words in that whole recommendation.
Thank you, Director Seegers. And one thing is that we are time constrained. We've asked for an extension on this previously. December 31st is our deadline for getting a response back. I'd actually like to thank you for putting your hand up, Director Lee, because I was totally about to call on you for your comments, as this is, of course, your area.
Yes, thank you. I was interested in everybody's comments. I appreciate what's been said. I must say I very much appreciate the role the SCRD and the Seashell Nation have played in this, and their willingness to consult with the community in this extremely important project. And I think it's very important and appropriate for the SCRD to take the role on that they're doing. In the rural areas, the government is the SCRD, and the SCRD is representing the residents in those areas. So I consider it completely appropriate for what's going on here. I'd like to make a motion to accept the recommendations on page 59 with the amendment as suggested by Director Beamish, if I may.
To remove small but, so that it's just an important part.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for the recommendations? I do have seconders. Thank you very much. I don't see any other hands up. This is voting all. Oh, Director McMahon, then Director Hiltz.
Yeah, while I'm supportive of the recommendation, I must admit that I have some trepidations about how we are going to be able to effectively engage the community while we're still in COVID mode. And I guess I look forward to maybe some more details from staff about how we think we might go about this.
I don't know if staff can necessarily answer that question at this time, but I'll invite GM Hall to speak if he would like to.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure this is entirely on the mark, but I would note that through continuing dialogue with the province and the Seashell Nation, staff are aware that there is more public information coming relating to the foundation agreement and to land use planning within the SWEA, and we expect that that information will begin to flow as early as next week. And so while we remain a committed partner to the implementation of the foundation agreement, it sounds like more leadership from the other parties will, and from the parties to the agreement itself, in terms of communication is coming. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Hiltz.
Yeah, I'm closer to supporting the recommendations. I do want to address one thing that I read in the correspondence from people opposed to this. And one of the things was the public consultation. And so I closed my eyes and went back to 1904 and thought of Joseph Gonzalez sitting there deciding, what are we going to call this place? Did he consult? There probably wasn't a lot of signs up that this is Solalis. It was a very down time for the Seychelles Nation. They were, before the amalgamation, they were almost decimated. It was a very challenging time. So I'm going, was there adequate consultation in the beginning? Maybe Mr. Gonzalez would have had a different opinion if he had understood what it was actually going on. As I do note that it was Madeira Landing, then became Madeira Park. There is a Gonzalez Road, which is different spelling from Mr. Gonzalez. So there's even, you know, the existing history isn't exactly clear. But so that's where I keep going back to, and I'm going, you know, it's something I'm trying to keep in mind, looking backwards to look forwards. And, you know, maybe even Mr. Gonzalez's wife, was she consulted around the kitchen table? with the First Nations matriarchal, as the knowledge keepers. I'm really wondering about that, and I can't go back there, but I'm trying to think about in 7 generations from now, looking back, if we keep saying at this time, when is going to be the right time? So I hope at this time does not mean 10 years from now. I'd like to know what, at this time is in the next couple of weeks, the next couple of months. Yeah, I can support that, but I'd sure not like to see this going on for another 7 generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Hiltz. Director Lee, I see your hand up.
Yes, I do appreciate what Director Hiltz is saying, and I think that this opportunity for consultation with all parties is very important. I do understand that, I don't know if it did occur or not back in the day, and it wasn't Mr. Gonzalez, actually, it was his daughter. Mr. Gonzalez was already deceased. It got its name by the federal government asking for the community what they'd like their post office named, and that's how it got its name. And they did ask the community, and the daughter replied, and there was no other suggestions. I understand. I wasn't there, but Director Hiltz is right. The Seashelt. Well, I guess there was members of the Seashelt community at the time that it was named as well there. It would have been there was a small community there at the time, but this is more important, and we need to, I think, reconciliation and consultation of all parties is very important, and I really look forward to this, and I think it's a huge step in the right direction.
All right. Thank you very much. Seeing no further hands up, I will call the question. This is voting all. All those in favor of the recommendations as adjusted. All right. Any opposed? No, that's carried. Just before we move on to Annex I have had a request for another brief break. So I just look for thumbs up if people would like to take a few minutes again, or if you want to keep plowing on, give me a thumbs down. See one thumbs up. Okay, I see a couple thumbs up. All right. 11:43 is 11:50 sufficient again? Okay, we'll come back at 11:50. Community Development meeting. Next up, we have Annex I, Regulations for Cannabis Production on Agricultural Land. And Mr. Seau, I see your name on the report, so I assume you'll be speaking to it.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this report provides an overview of the existing local and provincial regulations for cannabis production within the ARR and possible enhancement to SCRD zoning bylaws. The current SCRD zoning bylaws are inconsistent with the ARR use regulation because the 8-hectare size and 60-meter setback requirements constitute prohibition of cannabis production, which is permitted by the provincial regulation if it is outdoors or inside a structure with a soil base. Staff recommend that this inconsistency be rectified by amendment to the zoning bylaws with a general provision to recognize the precedence of the provincial regulation over local zoning bylaws and specific provisions for parcel size limitation and setback requirements for cannabis productions in the ARR. Thank you.
Thank you, Yuli. One thing I will note on the agenda is I believe it's currently tagged as regional planning voting all, but I believe that it's actually supposed to be rural planning, A, B, D, E, and F. Just a quick question for staff to confirm that. I missed that during the agenda review.
Yes, Chair. Thank you for the catch.
Okay, thank you. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I guess the question I'd have is, if we move the recommendations as presented in the regional district, do we have any limitations on who can grow cannabis anywhere in the rural area? Are we just wiping the slate clean and saying, okay, it's a free-for-all and we have to come back and put other regulations in to actually do some containment? What is the actual result if we do this?
Go ahead. Yuli or GM Hall, do we have other provisions to otherwise restrict anywhere?
Thank you for the question, Chair. I'll leave the technical response to. I'll leave the planning response to our planning team, if I may. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yuli?
Thank you, Chair. Well, at the minimum, the proposed amendment to the zoning bylaw only speaks to areas that are within the ARR, and only areas within the ARR are subject to the provincial regulation. And certainly there are other areas in other zones that are outside of ARR can have regulations for cannabis production.
Okay. So our existing regulations would continue to apply to land outside of the ALR. This change would really only be applicable to land within ALR.
That's correct.
Okay. Director Seegers, did you have a follow-up, or can I move on to Director McMahon?
So what you're saying is we currently don't have anything in the regional district in the zoning bylaws that restrict growing only in soil, for example. So those things have not been addressed yet in the regional district and would need to be addressed inside of the zoning bylaw that's coming forward. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Currently, in the zoning bylaws, there are no regulations specifically requiring a soil base for cannabis production. It is a provincial requirement. Certainly, when we amend the zoning bylaws, we can look at possibilities of regulations similar to that effect.
Comment then. I'm with Director McMahon about this is urgent that this move forward. Just like the other item we were talking about earlier. I mean, it's good that staff have the zoning bylaw on their radar, and I think now it's on our radar as well. So you need to know that we'll be watching for that to come forward, because this is a huge issue in the regional district. Thank you.
Director McMahon.
Yes, sooner rather than later. We need zoning. I'm struggling to understand how this change would affect our capacity to enforce existing regulations.
GM Hall. You're muted, GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair. I will attempt to answer the director's question, and then maybe offer that if my planning colleagues have more to add to add detail, then that would be welcomed. But the proposed revision merely seeks to clarify what is in fact already true, which is that provincial regulations take precedence over our zoning bylaw, and it eliminates a potential liability from regulating in excess of what we are permitted to do through a de facto prohibition on production on certain sizes of parcels. And the primary regulations on farmland that backstop all of our zoning are the Agricultural Land Commission's use regulation. And so when it comes to enforcement matters where there is, if we can generalize it as harm being done to agricultural lands, the province is the primary enforcement body. And in some of the recent cases where we've had questions come to us, the province has stepped in and taken on that role. The coordinating piece about providing information through to the Agricultural Land Commission, who doesn't have a regular presence on the coast, and ensuring that our zoning coordinates with those regulations is our responsibility. And then taking it back to the recommendations here, we recognize that we have an opportunity to improve our zoning through updated bylaws, and that's the third clause in the recommendation. But we also feel it as a sort of a housekeeping matter, it would be appropriate to make a change to the general use provisions just to clarify what is in fact already the case. Thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon. You're muted, Director McMahon.
Perhaps you could go to Director Hiltz first.
Okay, Director Hiltz.
Thank you, Chair. I'm following up on the non-soil based cultivation and kind of what control the SCRD has at this point in time. And it's the structure piece that you need a place to put plants, and it's a structure. And would that be governed under building bylaw? Like, in order to put a structure, would that be a building permit be required? The concern which came from the AAC, Agriculture Advisory Committee, is that once you put concrete down, it don't go away. It stays there, and it can cause inflation of land costs and all kinds of problems with the soil. So that's kind of between now. What control? So the zoning amendments won't necessarily have a lot to do with that control of the concrete. Like, what kind of controls can be put about concrete floors, I guess, is the question. Thank you.
Who'd like to tackle that question? Are we able to regulate, the use of concrete as a base material within an agricultural? Director Seegers.
Thank you. So this is from the District of Sechelt bylaw that we passed. It says cannabis cultivation is prohibited in a structure with a base consisting in part or entirely of any material that is not soil. right? So that actually addresses that piece. This is from our section on cannabis cultivation, agricultural areas.
Mr. Patey?
If I may, that regulation I understand, or that provision in the bylaw, is consistent with the Agricultural Land Commission's regulation on soil-based requirements for cannabis specifically, and that is the intent of an amendment that we would bring forward. That is that it would be consistent with the Agricultural Land Commission, where we could consider future regulation or restriction is on those areas of land outside the ALR where cannabis may be permitted in some capacity. But it's certainly a question that staff will take as we look into further developing, bringing forward that staff report and developing regulation specifically for this purpose.
Thank you. And I think that's key in the last clause of the recommendations here is that, primarily right now staff are looking to address a hole that could put us at risk because we're in conflict with the ALC regulations. There is work to do. That work needs to happen, needs to come back. And I think that's what is trying to be captured in that last clause. Director McMahon? You're muted.
I'm fine with housekeeping if that's needed. I am concerned that this is an urgent issue in my area. I'm hearing a whole lot of concern. There's an issue going on right now that has caused a lot of people to put their homes up for sale, and that concerns me a whole bunch. That people feel that they can't live in their homes anymore. We've got two urgent issues here. We've got the affordable housing problem, which maybe we could find some ways to address through rural zoning, but we also have this other problem with cannabis facilities, and I really feel that we can't wait for a process to wend its way along for like 2 years. So I'd kind of like some reassurance that we can get these urgent issues addressed somehow in a timely way.
Mr. Patey, you're unmuted.
I wasn't. Thank you, Chair. I wasn't unmuted to answer the question, but I guess I'll say that staff certainly hear the urgency for at least these very specific areas of affordable housing and cannabis, and understand and will look to ways to how we can expedite either bringing forward housekeeping amendments or how it could be included in the zoning bylaw. The zoning bylaw is a key priority project. We do work on it on a regular basis and meet on it on a regular basis. It's a very complex document and it's very long. So it needs to be definitely one of those projects that you don't have on the side of your desk for Friday mornings. It's a Monday to Friday project to really bring it along. So that's part of the problem. But staff are definitely working on it and hopes to bring something forward soon.
Thank you. As was mentioned earlier, staff were sort of tentatively trying to say the first half of 2021, but GM Hall, you've unmuted yourself.
Thank you, Chair. Just to build on Manager Patey's comments, it's stated in the report on page 67, but just to manage expectations and also to acknowledge the work that the board has done around advocacy. Zoning is a lever on some aspects of the cannabis quandary, but especially given ALC regulations and the right to farm, it will not solve some of the fundamental conflicts between odor, particularly, and land use. And so there are pieces that relate to regulations by senior governments and to enforcement by the agencies responsible for taking action on other pieces of this question. But to circle back to what Mr. Patey said, staff understand the urgency around the zoning piece, which is the piece in SCRD's control. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I was following this conversation quite closely, and I understand the concerns. But I don't think we should be too hasty setting these regulations. We do want to participate in this new economy. At least I believe we do. It's a good business. There's money to be made, but it needs to be done in the right place. It needs to be done the right way. But we got to make sure that we don't, by accident, mess up some existing businesses, such as greenhouses that are producing a lot of good foods locally on agricultural land, and they're good, solid businesses, and they're done in greenhouses. We got to be careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater here as we do this. So I don't think it's something we want to rush into, but I think aligning our regulations with the agricultural land reserve use regulations is an important first step, so that we can at least enforce those parts of it. So those are my comments. I'll wait to hear from Director Ties before I do any more. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Lee. Director Ties.
Hey, you got my last name right, Len. It's only been 2 years. Yeah, my comment around this is that a lot of it hinges around the federal regulations on cannabis, and as well as the right to access regulations, which are not easy to understand, and put limits on the ability of first the police as well as our bylaws to actually do much about it. So I am wondering what the next steps forwards would be in understanding the right to access legislation, as well as possible steps that we can do for advocacy around that. I think we need to get smart around this regulation, and then put together the right type of advocacy that we can then approach our MP with. So this is, I'm wondering if we could task staff to do a report, but I know they're already slammed. So I'll have a look at it, but I think I might need some help.
Okay. Sorry, Director Ties, I just wanted to know a little bit more about what specific type of advocacy you're looking for us to be doing with the federal government.
From what little I understand is that the federal government has the right to access legislation that means that people with a medical marijuana license can grow marijuana for their own consumption, and that a certain number of plants are allowed to be grown inside the home according to this legislation. But as soon as they have that license, that the police can't come in and actually check whether that amount is being grown, whether the amount grown or whether the growing operation is following proper ventilation, electrical procedures, plumbing, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of safety issues around this legislation, and of course there's a lot of people taking license, when they're allowed to grow, I don't know, 5 plants and or 10 plants, and there's a whole house that's a grow up. So there's a lot of cash economy that's off to the side in regards to this. So that's my understanding of the topic, and I think there's some advocacy that needs to be put in order to make it so that we can adequately enforce and regulate the use of houses as grow ops, as well as what medical marijuana licenses actually permit to be used for.
Okay, thank you. Director McMahon.
Right. With respect, the issue here at the moment is protecting agricultural land, and that's what the people in my community are concerned about. I'm fine to move the recommendations on page 66, but I do want to come back after we settle that.
Okay, and I see a seconder for that. Thank you. Director Pratt, were you raising your hand? Okay. I don't see any further hands up with regards to the recommendations. So, rural planning, A, B, D, E, and F. All those in favor? All right, that's carried. Thank you very much. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I'm going to reiterate that I'm a little concerned that the process is not going to work well for public engagement on some pressing issues that the community is concerned about. What happened, if I recall correctly, with the bylaw 310 roadshow was that it kind of got waylaid by public concern over short-term rentals. So what we did at that point, or staff did, and it made perfect sense, was to take that portion of the issue and move ahead with that because it was urgent. The bylaw, as pointed out, is big and it's complicated, and it's hard to do public consultation on it because there's so many technical details. So I just wonder, I realize that staff in an organized way want to get everything done at once, but I'm wondering if we wouldn't be wiser to bite off bits that we can deal with and do it in a step-by-step fashion. I throw that out there.
Just before I ask staff to comment on that, I will note that, with the District of Seashelt and our zoning bylaw, our planning staff did sort of, when they did the consultation, it was, very bite-sized chunks. This is what what do you think about home-based businesses? What do you think about urban agriculture? What do you think about short-term rentals? And so the responses could be very targeted towards subjects that people were interested in specifically, because if somebody has an interest in short-term rentals, they may not care about urban agriculture or what have you. So, yeah, just wondering if staff wanted to weigh in with anything there about biting off some agriculture work ahead of the zoning bylaw as a whole. GM Hall.
Thank you for the question, Chair. The two comments that staff can offer in response are, firstly, that as stated previously, we do have and we rely on the Agricultural Land Commission as our backstop, and have been pleased with the cooperation on enforcement when it comes to that. And secondly, that we understand the forthcoming challenge in introducing a new bylaw. We got very high quality input during the early part of the process that we can use to frame how the newly drafted bylaw responds to what we heard. And we, with board leadership, we have new communication and engagement tools in our toolbox that we, and personnel, that we look forward to using on this important project. Thanks.
Thank you. Director McMahon, did you want to follow up with that, or you You're happy?
Oh, no, I'm never happy. But I think we'll leave it there for right now and maybe consider it again or think about it some more after the holidays.
All right. Thank you. Moving on to Annex J, TELUS Telecommunication Tower in Egmont Earls Cove, request for local government concurrence. And turn this over to Mr. Sayal.
Thank you, Chair. So TELUS is seeking local government concurrence on a telecommunication tower to be located on provincial land between Egmont and Earls Cove. The purpose of this installation is to improve wireless connectivity and also to support emergency response in these areas. The location of the tower is appropriate in this rural area with very little impact on surrounding land uses. TELUS has conducted the required public consultation with no objection, and the proposal is also supported by the Area A APC. Staff recommend providing concurrence regarding this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Directors, any questions, comments, recommendations to move forward? Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to make a motion to accept the recommendations as submitted by staff on page 69 of our report.
All right, thank you. And I see multiple seconders for that. This is rural planning again, A, B, D, E, and F. I don't see any hands up, so I will call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex K, which is the monthly provincial referral review. And I see Julie Clark, Senior Planner, has joined us.
Good afternoon, directors and community members. This month's provincial referral review includes 2 applications to the province that are seeking tenure permission, both for morages, community moorage at New Brighton on Gambier Island, as we've heard, and a private moorage in Bargain Bay in Area A. Both moorages are proposed in areas that are outside SCRD zoning bylaws and other service areas. And as a result, both referral responses are recommended as interests unaffected. And as we heard through the delegation presentation earlier this morning, unrelated to the tenure application for New Brighton, SCRD is engaged in dialogue on the future of that facility. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Directors, questions, comments, recommendations to move forward? Director Lee.
I still do struggle with these kind of referrals when once the lease is given, it becomes a private piece of private property, and what's being built on the private property could affect the residents on each side of where the property is built. But that's a different, I guess that's something we're working on. I'm wondering if no objection is a better comment than interest unaffected. We have had instances of, one comes to mind in Half Moon Bay when it was a huge structure being built and we had comments made and things like that. Anyways, my APC is fine with it anyways, so I guess I'm fine with it, but it's, I'm interested in what other directors think about how we should be responding to these.
Just a real quick question actually that follows up from that for Ms. Clark. The difference between, you know, us submitting a interests unaffected or a no objection. Can you just give sort of the 50 words or less Cole's notes on that?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. Thank you. The test we usually apply to the interests unaffected selection, the province has 4 options we can choose from. And the interest unaffected is what we choose when when the SCRD has no regulations that are affected by this proposal. When we select no objections, it is often when we do have regulations, but there is no contravention associated with it.
Okay, thank you very much. Director Seegers.
Thank you. So just to clarify, this is just formalizing the divestiture that actually happened back in whatever it was, 2013 or 14 or whatever. Is that correct?
With regards to the first application, right?
Yes, with regards to the first one. Sorry. Thank you.
GM Hall.
Thank you, and the senior planner can correct me if I'm wrong here, but this could either be a renewal of an expired water lease, or it could be a water lease that should have been issued at some point, a tenure that should have been issued and wasn't. Speaking on behalf of the Port Service, who has a number of these leases issued by the province, the province's attention to them and the amount of time between when they expire and when they're renewed and things like that don't necessarily flow in as tight a way as the SCRD might operate our own lands or services. But notwithstanding the origin of how this referral came to be, it does represent an effort on the part of the Squamish Nation to get all of the paperwork in order for the facility as a lead up to possible divestiture. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Hiltz.
For Director Seegers, I'd be happy to add the comment out of the application form, which it says the application is merely to formalize a Crown transfer of an existing port facility to a First Nations owned company. It seems to be almost housekeeping.
That's why I'm saying there's really nothing for us to comment on, because it's just the paperwork that should have been done.
Director McMahon.
I'm happy to move the recommendations on page 85.
Thank you. Looking for a seconder for that. Thank you. I've got seconders. Rural planning, A, B, D, E, and F. I see no further hands, so I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. That's carried. Moving on to Annex L, Sunshine Coast Community Solar Association delegation, next steps. And turn that over to Mr. Shea.
Thank you, Chair. This report outlines possible next steps following the Sunshine Coast Community Solar Association delegation's proposals. Staff completed a brief review of the thoughtful proposals presented by the association, and staff recommend a shovel-ready lighting retrofit project be developed in 2021 for selected facilities, and that work towards a renewable energy strategy began in 2021, so that such a project could be considered in 2022 budget process and work plans. Additionally, staff have continued to be in dialogue with the Solar Association. Should the board opt to proceed with these projects, staff will explore how and where public participation can be further integrated. Thank you, Chair. Staff are happy to take any questions at this time.
Thank you. I see a hand up already. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I appreciate that staff put together the research on this, but I'm a little disappointed in the outcome. For one thing, we have one of our strategic objectives is working together with community groups in partnership. And this is not something historically that the SCRD has done very well. I think we need better. Basically, when the SCRD has gotten involved in a number of projects, and Grantham's Hall comes to mind, it seems like the SCRD just takes it over. And that's the end of the community groups participation in the project. So I think we need to look at a better framework for partnerships with community organizations. I was horrified to discover that the roof is only good till 2025. That's 18 years by my calculations. And if that's true, well, I could get into what I think about our recreation facilities, but I won't go there because that's off topic. There was a mention of opportunities for grants, but did not mention that the project would qualify for gas tax funding. So I am totally on board with a renewable energy strategy. We need it. We need it as soon as possible, and you know, so I can get behind that. And I also appreciate that we have a lot of projects coming forward into the 2021 budget. So even if we approve this project for 2021, there's a fairly good chance that it wouldn't happen. I mean, if we look at the number of carry forwards we've had the last 2 years. So I'm, yeah, I'm going to stop there for a minute and regroup.
Thank you, Director McMahon. I know we've had a little bit of discussion in terms of the gas tax funding and the fact that it's on a, you know, the solar project specifically being on a regional recreation site. You know, how does Gibson's and Seashelt contribute to that? So there'd have to be some conversation there, because we don't have, within the regional district, we don't have gas tax funding pots. You know, we've got our own, but it would require some sort of contribution agreement to be drafted as well. But Director Ties?
Yeah, thank you for the report, and I also appreciate Director McMahon's comments. I do think that you know, a strategy is needed moving forwards, especially identifying the low-hanging fruit where we can reduce emissions as well as offset some in the most cost-effective way. And I believe and hope that the staff coming online in the coming year will be able to put something like that together. I think, you know, a solar array on top of large roofs is a wonderful idea, but in many ways it is somewhat altruistic, as it the return on investment, you know, when you're looking at 20 years, it's often not not something that that should be done unless we get some federal and provincial funding, but that's still coming out of taxpayers' pockets. So I think I support the whole idea of getting to net zero, and I hope that we can have some future staff capacity to address all that. But I think I'm somewhat supportive of the recommendations that staff have to put together at this point.
All right, thank you, Director Ties. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I must say I read this report with quite a bit of interest. And what originally struck me is we do need a strategy to move forward effectively to address the CO2. And we need to spend our money strategically because we don't have a lot of money. And it's the question for me as I was reading it, is it really desirable to replace hydro with solar panels? It could easily be a step backwards rather than forwards when you do something like that. Whereas if you were to put a solar panel on something that was being fed by natural gas, it's a slam dunk. So as is converting our vehicles to electricity when it becomes time and it's a cost-effective investment. So I really do want to commend staff on taking a very good look and a very fresh look at this. I thought it was good. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm going to echo Director Lee's good report. Answered all kinds of questions and helped me understand what's actually useful. There was two questions in the report, or one question in the report and a question on the recommendation. I'll start with the recommendation. It's the last further end that staff mentioned 2021 timeline. The recommendation, the timeline isn't there. So I'm just wondering, is this kind of setting up the 2021 work plan, or where does the project fall into the 2021 work plan budget process? And then my other question is on page 92, it was talking about a normal payback period of 5 to 10 years. And I was just wondering if that's, what is the standard for that 5 to 10 year? Is this like an SCRD policy of how to evaluate things? Just a little context about that normal payback period. So the 2021 in the recommendation and the payback period.
Who would like to take that on? Go ahead, Mr. Shea.
Thank you, Chair. So just on for the first question, is it addressing the lighting retrofit proposal recommendation? Okay. So at this point, the way that the proposal is structured is it's to get the ducks lined up in a row so that when a grant is the right match, staff is ready to put its best foot forward for something that would maximize benefit. So right now it's not tied to the budget process. It's more tied to the to getting everything ready. With regards to the second question, the 5 to 10 years is not a specific SCRD policy. It was something that was guiding considerations at the time of the solar thermal at the Sunshine Coast, or the Sea Shelf Aquatic Center.
Thank you. Follow up, Director Hiltz, or are you okay?
Yeah, just do we need that 2021 in that recommendation? That's kind of the, do we need some, does that number need to be there? Or is just a simple question?
Chair, from staff's point of view, it probably doesn't need to be there. Staff would action this as soon as possible, but if it's the committee's desire to add some specificity, that's absolutely fine by staff. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, one stipulation there is, sort of action it as soon as possible, but it doesn't necessarily mean throw everything else out the window just to work on this, right? I think preparing projects for granting opportunities probably is one of those side of the desk Friday morning jobs, but that's up to staff to decide. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I had a similar question about the first and that. So first of all, this, I understand if we pass this, it will impact the 2021 work plan. But if I go to the report and I look on page, and I highlighted it, where'd my highlighting go? There we go. Page 91, option 1.1. So it talks about the renewable energy strategy for the SCRD. What it says in here is that we would assess facilities, not just selected facilities. We would assess facilities as well as we can with the information we have and put them into various groups so that we could determine where our biggest bang for the buck is, and we can start moving projects forward. I don't know if in my world, if the and that's there actually stipulates that. It says that staff bring forward a proposal to budget 2022 for a renewable energy strategy at selected sites. So when I read that, I'm reading that we're going to take these 5 sites and we're going to look at what's possible there, rather than what the complete recommendation says in the report, where it talks about looking at the facilities and then categorizing them. So I just like clarity on how you actually see this going forward and whether or not that recommendation reflects what you actually are looking at doing.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I think in drafting this report, staff looked at the work that's described on page 91 as being operational, and that staff would build into the work plan, but that if we are reaching ahead to a budget process and seeking to confirm what the goalpost is and avoid any surprises to a future committee, just clarifying by way of a directive that that the board would like to see something for the 2022 budget process, so that we know that the work that we are doing is aligned with the board's expectation. Thank you.
Sorry, just to follow up, I understand the budget 2022 process, right? I mean, I think that's pretty well clear, laid out in here. But the piece that I have issue with is selected sites. Sorry, I get my hand away from my microphone. Selected sites. How are the selected sites? There's nothing in here indicating that we're actually going to do what is indicated on page 91, where it talks about looking at a facility assessment, basically district-wide as much as possible. It's talking about selected sites. So this would be, what I would see with this is a renewable energy strategy for SCRD sites, not just selected sites. It's all the sites. And through that, you might come back and say, we don't have enough information on these to actually categorize them. Great. We're still looking at a renewable energy strategy for all of the sites in the regional district, not selected sites. We don't want to see something coming back and say, well, okay, we looked at the Gibson's Aquatic Center, we looked at Frank West Hall, and we didn't look at anything else. Those were the selected sites we chose. You know where I'm going with this?
Yeah, thank you. I believe I understand the question better now, and certainly if the committee wishes to amend to clarify the intent, then staff understand and are of the same mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Pratt.
Thanks. I'm in support of this. I think as a regional district, I think we're behind where we should be, but completely, it speaks to the less malleable way that we have to do budgeting here, because my experience at a school district table has been, we were able to identify projects and move things forward very quickly with when we were doing current projects within with our capital planning. So having it in policy, having it broad enough that if something comes up that we can very quickly, that staff can very quickly move without having to go back and forth. I'm in incredible support of that. I would support Director Seegers' point as well, that it's just, maybe taking out the selected sites and leaving it a little bit more broad, and then it gives staff a little more flexibility in how they move forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I agree entirely with Director Seegers. And as part of this process, we need to set some goals too for where we're going to get to. The goal, of course, the long-term goal is to get to zero net emissions, but we need to set the targets and actually meet them, unlike the province and the federal government. So, yeah, I guess I can support this going forward with an amendment to remove the selected sites phrase.
Thank you. Director Beamish.
I think I concur as well with Director Seegers, and I don't think that the third bullet is needed at this point in time. I think we do need to develop a renewable energy strategy. I think that's the first step as to what we want to do, and then looking at shovel-ready projects. If there is something that jumps out, often grants will come available. We did the City Hall in Tuktoyaktuk within 3 months. We had the a grant announcement and it assessed and done that quickly. So we can move quickly if they're available, but having a renewable energy strategy that we can all agree on and move forward with, that we could also look at from a municipal level, I think is an important first step.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
Thank you. Clarification, if we were to remove that last line, would staff still move that forward as part of a renewable energy strategy? I know that over the last number of years, there have been many times when grants have become available for these electrical retrofits, right? Putting in the LED lighting, etc. They're smaller, but we need to be ready to jump on them quickly. And as we've seen right now with the way grant proposal or grant opportunities are coming out, the turnaround time is really short. So if we only go with the second line and end it at, SCRD sites, will staff still move forward with doing the work required for the last one? Or do you want it specifically identified to be ready for those?
Just before staff answer that, I think, personally, I think it's good to leave it in here because it's something that if a grant opportunity comes along and staff haven't necessarily looked at, they've got to drop something in order to get it ready for that grant application. Whereas if we leave it in here, it's something that they can work on as part of the work plan and put it on a shelf and wait for an opportunity to come along, or they can just pull that plan off a shelf and send it in. But I'll look to staff to see if they wanted to chime in on that. Go ahead, GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify that the two activities are a bit different. The renewable energy strategy is about fuel switching or energy generation, and as described in the report, is an opportunity to work with community groups who have expertise in those areas. Whereas the last item is more about efficiency and replacing fixtures to reduce our demand in the hopes that it makes more energy available to other users and also generate some savings. Thank you.
Director Seegers.
I'll make a recommendation that we move the recommendations on page 89 with a slight change to the first and that, where it says for renewable energy strategy for SCRD sites. All right. Do I have a seconder for that? Seconded. Thank you. This is Regional Sustainability Services, voting all. I see no further hands up. So I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. That's carried. Moving on to, sorry, find my page here. I'd like to look at annexes M and N at the same time, both APC minutes. If there's anything anybody wants to flag or bring up from those. Director Hiltz.
Yes, thanks, Chair. It was in APC area F on page 97. It was a comment that was talked about. The APC is discussing the application. The neighborhood responses have gone out. I think the APC took place on the 24th, so responses haven't come back. So there's a timing issue, and I'm just wondering if it's possible for, as part of the APC package, that the APC actually receives the letter that went out and the number of letters, because the commissions were having real trouble understanding the context of, is it one house, or we're going to have 10 angry people or one angry person? So they kind of want to know the scope, even though they might not have the comments. Knowing if it's 100 meters and there's 10 houses and this is the letter that we received, I think would help them feel more comfortable, because they're putting conditional support behind this, conditional that no one's angry at them. So I think it could help them. So that's a comment for staff, whether as an assistance to the APC, package that goes out. And for me, I would, and so it goes out on the 24th, it goes to a certain time. And so they really don't know. It just feels very void that it goes out on the 20th, we deliberate on the 24th. We don't know if it's a 30-day or a 2-week period and how many buildings are involved. So whether staff can do that or as just regular course, take it as a comment.
Mr. Patey, I see you've unmuted.
Thank you for the comment and question. Notification is a little bit of a complicated issue, and staff are, of course, willing to take that question as part of our review of support for APCs, and have the intent to provide APC orientation once appointments are refulfilled after this next round in February. So we definitely hear the need for good information to formulate, for the APCs to formulate their advice on.
Okay, thank you. Anything else from M or N? Don't see any hands. Anything from the communications, Annex O or P? I don't see anything, but maybe somebody would like to say something. Seeing no hands up, I'm going to move on. We have no new business. We have no in-camera session. So I look for a motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded, all those in favor. Great. Thank you very much. Any questions from the gallery? We do have one hand up. I think they've been given permission to speak, so you can unmute yourself and go ahead.
Can you see me or just hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm on the board of the Sunshine Coast Community Solar Association. And there was just a couple of things I wanted to mention in regards to the plan of having, solar, say, on a giant perfect roof like the Gibson's community center. And that is that, I guess why we ended up recommending it is because we're aware that there's quite a bit of gas tax money, and it's very easy build to put something like that on. I don't know if the board is aware, but solar panels have certainly come down a lot in price. They're way more efficient. The school district, who has now 4, schools with some of them really, really big arrays on them, has found that the solar panels are really paying off for them. I mean, I guess they got some help from projects or whatever, but Jerry Pajot, an engineer on our board, has figured out that if you do invest in solar, we have solar in our house, there's about a 3.4% return on your investment, which is actually pretty good, nowadays. And it takes about 15 years, to pay them off. And we're finding that as well. The solar array that we recently put with the James Pauley Legacy money on the school, the C-Shop Center roof, that has earned them $1,000 back off their hydro bills, and it's just a smallish array, 28 panels. It really depends on how many panels you can get on there. Now, in terms of offsetting BC Hydro, actually, solar is one of the most benign of all energies, because it doesn't require the giant infrastructure. And as you probably are aware, when you're flooding a valley, say, for example, the Peace Valley or any of the valleys that have been flooded, that leads to huge problems in terms of methane emissions. It leads to huge problems in terms of marine life and all that. So in fact, in many places in the world, they're starting to decommission dams. So to say that that hydro is a really clean energy isn't quite correct. In fact, solar is probably about the most benign that we know of. So it is a good route to go in terms of sustainability. It's a good route to go in terms of cost. And I guess my question, if I'm allowed to put this question out there, is that what would be the objection to, say, using the excess money that's been sitting there, for quite some time, and the gas tax, to do something that's really a very easy thing to do on a perfect roof like the Gibson's Rec Center.
Thank you. Director Seegers, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I'd like to address that. I think some of it comes down to the funding at the regional district. As we've been talking about, there are these silos, there are these pools of funding categories. And yes, while the rural area directors have gas tax funds sitting there, the facility at Gibson's Aquatic is a recreation facility which is funded coastwide. So it cannot be funded solely from the rural area director's gas tax funds. So part of the process that needs to happen is conversation with the District of Seashelt and the town of Gibson's for contribution as well, whether it's from our gas tax funds or somewhere else. As this has not been something that's been on our radar, I can tell you that our gas tax funds in the District of Seashelt currently are fully committed to other projects. So that's going to be part of the work that has to be done behind the scenes to actually be able to fund it. So it's not that we're not wanting to move the project forward. We need to put the processes in place so that it can actually happen.
And at one point I did extend an invitation to directors to go see the array that's up on the roof of Trailway Center. Obviously COVID has made things difficult with the further tightening restrictions. That invitation is still open, though obviously we have to keep our group sizes to one or two, not the board. So Gail, did you have any other questions, or
well, in terms of that, actually the Trail Bay Mall, or say the roof of the rec center, it's quite easy to put an array on a flat roof. It's actually, if the roof has to eventually be replaced, it's easy to take off the panels. You'd have to just, I guess, I don't know how they get them off, but it's a fairly easy thing. We didn't have an old roof, or we didn't have a new roof, I should say, when we put up our panels, but the panels actually do help protect the roof as well. And, roofs, so that's one thing. I just wanted to.
Sorry, real quick. Do you have a question? Because we do have another meeting that we have to attend after this as well.
Well, in that case, I'll just limit myself to asking whether I understand that maybe Seashelt doesn't have gas tax money, but the facility is in Gibson's, and I wonder if Gibson's could assist with that. And our group has expressed a desire to help to fundraise for the project too. So between the SCRD and the Gibson's possible tax money, is that a possibility?
It's a broader conversation than just where exactly can we extract the dollars from, and that the facility is a part of a coast-wide funded function. So it has to be funded as a coast-wide project. So it's not about whether Seashelt has gas tax dollars to spare. It's about legislatively Seashelt has to contribute to the project as well as Gibson's. So yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Director Lee, I'd seen your hand go up there real quick. Was there anything you wanted to add in real quick?
Just that there's a bit of a misconception that we have this surplus gas tax money sitting around. We have a strong desire to spend that money, and we don't like to see it sitting around. We were actually waiting for active transportation, and it had been earmarked for that. And I know in the area A, or for the area A gas tax money, there's a lot of things that we'd like to see it spent on. We could use a lot more money for all the projects. So it is not that there's a bunch of money sitting around doing nothing. Previous directors had earmarked it for a project that actually has not got going, and we're reviewing it. So I believe the other areas are in a very similar situation to Area A too. It's not that we have a whole bunch of money sitting doing nothing. It's what it was reserved for originally is the issue.
Thank you, Len. That's it. We're done this one. We did all the stuff that had to go to board fairly early on in the meeting, so I'm hoping that 1:30 is okay with staff side of things. I don't know how directors feel about 1:30, but
I was just going to ask that if staff is ready, would be ready for 1:30, or if we should push back to 2, and same question to directors.
Make 1:30 work. I would personally prefer 2. I have a couple of things to deal with, but if staff are ready, if they don't need any time, I'll make it happen.
GM Hall, CAO McKinley, will start at 1:30 or 2 o'clock, and same with directors.
I would think that 1:30 is okay, but if the directors would like 2, that's fine with staff.
I'm hurrying 1 for 2. Who would like 1:30? Who would? Okay, I see a couple at 1:30. Who would prefer 2?
There we
Okay,
go.
I'm seeing 2 o'clock then for a reconvening of the board.
45?
What? We're not bargaining here.
1:48.
Can I request, Roy, could I request that you text Warren? Because he does try to make the board meetings, but yep. If he doesn't know that it's late, I know last week or 2 weeks ago, he came on and then left because nobody else was there.
Yeah, I will message him right now. Okay, so I'm hearing 2 o'clock, confirming with staff 2 o'clock for start, and I'm assuming IT will just put a little sign up that says board meeting to begin at 2 o'clock.
We'll be ready at 2.
Excellent. Okay, everybody get outside, get some fresh air before you continue in with your day, please. That's the mom and me.